All right, guys, lesson 3 today, looking at the production miracle and women in World War II, really focusing in on the economy. Big idea here, a big question. When fighting a modern war, is it possible that manufacturing in the home front is more important than the troops in the war? Today, we're really going to look at the home front and what Americans are doing there on the home front. Some of the topics that we're going to cover: the growth of American manufacturing during World War II. We're creating ships, we're creating planes, we're doing all of these things to support the war effort. The Bracero program, which brings a lot of Mexicans into America, kind of setting a precedent for immigration in the future, and women in military service during World War II, whether it was short-lived or whether it had some longer-lasting effects. Economies play a crucial role in winning wars just as much as militaries do in many ways. World War II transformed American factories into centers of wartime production, revitalized the economy, provided arms to the Allied nations, and helped the United States rise out of the Great Depression. This period marked the beginning of significant economic growth in the United States that would last many decades. Although President Roosevelt's New Deal had improved the worst effects of the Great Depression, the economy was still struggling in the 1930s. However, the outbreak of war in Europe changed everything. Despite a policy of isolationism or staying out, Americans were eager to sell weapons and supplies to the Allies. The attack on Pearl Harbor further shifted the situation, leading the United States to engage its economy in the war effort fully. The nation, often referred to as a sleeping giant, mobilized its vast economic resources to support global warfare. Agencies like the War Production Board and the Office of War Mobilization organized production for the military, and economic output surged. An economy that had previously been unable to employ 25% of its people less than a decade earlier now faced a labor shortage or didn't have enough workers. Government spending during the 4 years of the war doubled all previous federal spending in United States history. That's crazy. The budget deficit increased significantly, but as economists from the Great Depression had suggested, this massive government spending eliminated unemployment and stimulated growth. The unemployment rate fell from 19% in 1938 to just 1.2% by 1944. The economy that emerged after the war was a vastly different one from the one that had entered it. Americans are often credited for the production miracle that helped win World War II. Factories that had once made appliances and automobiles shifted to producing weapons and military vehicles, limiting consumer choices as those factories weren't making goods for most consumers anymore. The Ford Motor Company became the leading producer of B-24 bombers. American manufacturing was able to produce Liberty ships, these giant warship boats, in just 5 days, and planes and tanks in a fraction of the time, sometimes only hours. The focus on military production impacted the civilian consumer economy too. Americans received rationing cards, and purchasing items like gasoline, coffee, meat, cheese, butter, processed foods, firewood, and sugar required these cards. People were encouraged to plant victory gardens to grow their own food in support of the war, and over 20 million Americans did so. The housing industry stagnated, leading to overcrowding in cities as fewer houses were being built during the war. Despite these challenges, the wartime economy thrived. The Roosevelt administration encouraged citizens to save their money or to invest in war bonds to combat inflation. National campaigns to sell bonds featured Hollywood celebrities and were very successful. These initiatives not only helped pay for the war, but also helped control inflation. Many retired Americans began to volunteer, and the war was seen as an all-hands-on-deck mission, and each American was required to do their part. With the economy flourishing and 20 million American workers serving in the military, unemployment nearly vanished. Many African Americans continued to migrate from the rural South to the industrial North to find better job opportunities, specifically in factories. As more men joined the military and job openings increased, women entered the workforce in large numbers. American industries even looked to Mexico to fill labor shortages. Between 1942 and 1964, the United States contracted thousands of Mexican nationals to work in agriculture or on farms and railroads through the Bracero program. This program, overseen by various government departments, resulted in 5 million Mexicans coming to the Americas to the United States to work in 24 different states. With factory jobs booming and a significant need for agricultural labor, the governments of Mexico and the United States signed an agreement in July 1942 to bring the first groups of contracted workers to California. As a result of this immigration and movement to the coast, for weapons production, California became the fastest growing state by the end of World War II and has been the largest state by population since. The Bracero program continued post-war, remaining in place until the 1960s when U.S. immigration laws were revised. Although many Braceros faced harsh working conditions, many viewed the opportunity as beneficial. Interviews with former Braceros reveal mixed feelings. While one described poor treatment by employers, another expressed gratitude for the chance to work in the U.S. and earn good pay. The program played a significant role in reinstating Mexican migration, establishing migrant farm work, which we still have today, and increasing the Mexican presence in the southern and western United States. President Franklin D. Roosevelt and his administration urged all capable American women to contribute to the war effort. He believed that women's involvement was essential for achieving victory, and society expected women to take on various roles to free men for military service. While many women chose to stay home or volunteer, many entered the workforce or enlisted in the military. World War II created unprecedented job opportunities for American women. Industries that were traditionally male-dominated began to employ women as they filled roles in munitions factories and other similar industries. The war created a lot of job opportunities, and women filled these in large numbers. The famous image here of Rosie the Riveter, depicting a strong woman in coveralls with the slogan, "We can do it," became a symbol of women's contributions during the war. Women also took on various government positions, with over 1 million administrative roles transferred from men to women during this period. As women joined the workforce in record numbers, they filled vacancies left by deployed men and took on new positions created by war production. Posters like the iconic "We Can Do It" encouraged women to work in factories to support the war. For those that did not wish to work in factories, many volunteer opportunities were available. The American Red Cross, the largest charitable organization in the country, encouraged women to volunteer locally. Millions of women organized community events, packed and shipped nearly 500,000 tons of medical supplies overseas, and prepared 27 million care packages for American and Allied prisoners of war. The Red Cross required female volunteers to train as nurses' aides, providing additional support to hospitals facing staff shortages. Other organizations, including religious and social groups, offered further avenues for women to engage in volunteer work. Military service was also an option for women who wanted to contribute to the war. Over 350,000 women served in various all-female military units, including the Army and Navy Nurses Corps, Reserves, and the Women's Army Corps. The Nurses Corps alone commissioned 105,000 nurses who were recruited by the American Red Cross, serving in hospitals and medical units at home and abroad. However, Jim Crow segregation was a significant issue for black women during World War II seeking to join the war effort. Even after President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 8802, which opened up employment to black Americans, many black women were assigned only to low-level jobs in factories. Segregation also extended to factory dining areas, forcing many women to work night shifts to avoid contact with white workers. In the military, only the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps and the Nurses Corps allowed black women to serve, and there were strict limits on the number of black women enlisted and offered jobs. The American Red Cross only recruited 400 black nurses for the Army and Navy Nurses Corps Reserves, and they worked in segregated hospitals both domestically and overseas. After the war, despite the iconic image of Rosie the Riveter, many women left the workforce voluntarily or lost their jobs as men came home. Former military women faced numerous challenges when transitioning to civilian life or living, outside of a wartime, including difficulties in obtaining veterans' benefits. The nation that had called on women to assist during the war was not fully prepared to meet their needs in the post-war period. However, World War II undeniably changed women's lives in America. The idea of women's work was largely changed as more women began to work in manufacturing and outside of the home. The number of women who worked as secretaries and clerical workers increased by 400%. The federal government poured about $50 million into daycare centers so that women could go to work instead of taking care of all of their children at home. Overall, World War II strengthened American women's belief that they could have long careers outside the home, a belief that would impact every future generation of Americans, and we've only seen women's employment increase since. All right, that's lesson 3, looking at production, the U.S. Ability to produce war weapons, the Bracero program, and women's employment.